Hi, it's Nathan with Critter Performance again, and we are going to finish our teardown on our RB25 today. I know it's been 8 months, and we do apologize for the delay. We are going to address some comments that we had on the first video, and some questions. We'll get those taken care of, and we will get right into this teardown. Alright, first we're going to talk about the chemicals that I referred to in the first video about cleaning off the rust out of our block. Now, this one's not super bad, but I like to have it nice and clean. So, if you have a running vehicle and you have rust in the system, this is the one I recommend. This is the Vapor Rust product. It's made to go in the block while the vehicle's running. Just follow the directions. Works great. This one is just for general rusty metal. You can use it on anything. If you got anything rusty, just dunk it in there, let it sit, and it takes the rust right off of it. The way I use this on a block is when the block's more complete, you can seal up all your coolant ports. And you can just dump it in through the top of the deck, let it set, it'll eat all the stuff out of there, rinse it out with water, you're good to go. Or there's options such as electrolysis, but I'm not going into that in this video. Alright, and then another thing we talked about was wideband knock sensors. We also had a couple of comments asking about the part number for the stud kit to attach a wideband knock sensor. Now, I typically buy them in a kit from WHP or ECU Masters. The part number is WHPK&K, and you can get them at wholesalehorsepower.com. It comes with the wideband knock sensor, and then it comes with the stud kit and the wiring connector with the pins, so you can pin it right to your harness and you're good to go. We're live from Nathan's garage. We've got Nathan tearing down a RB25 Neo. Wow!
That's going in.
Oh. One more time, get that out of my system. Alright, now that we've got that out of the way, any more questions, just leave them in the comments. I will be sure to get back to you. I will try to comment back. If not, just mention it in the next video so everybody can see it. Now we're going to go ahead and start in the bottom end here. We're going to take the water pump off, take the oil pump off, take the pan off, and then we'll do another update and see where we're at then. Water pump, we got 10 mil heads, 12 mil heads. And then we got to take off our tensioner and our idler here. 17 on the idler, 14 on the tensioner, which is already loose because we took our timing belt off. Let's go ahead and get at it. Alright, we're going to start with taking the rest of our timing components off. We got a 14 mil here on the tensioner, we got a 17 here on the idler. Let's go ahead and hit them both with impact. This one's already loose from taking off our belt. So, don't lose your hardware on the tensioner there. You've got a nut, a flat washer, and there's going to be a little curved flat washer. It's a curved lock washer of sorts. Pull it off. There's a big spring on there on the back for setting your tension. Alright, now that that's out of the way, we can go ahead and zip off all our water pump bolts. Like I said, they're 12 mils. And then you got a random 10 mil here and then a 14 down here in the corner. Right. Once your hardware is all off, make sure you got every single one of them. We don't want to crack an ear off the water pump, even though we're not going to reuse it. The love tap should come right off. Like I was talking about before, there's not a whole bunch of rust in there. There's a little bit of light stuff. Nothing too big to worry about. We could honestly just clean it out and put it back on, but we're going to clean it out the proper way and get all the rust out of the block. Alright, now we'll go ahead and flip it over and take the oil pan off before we take the oil pump off. Alright, now we're going to take the oil pan off. This is not a standard RB25 pan. This is a Stygia pan. It did have an all-wheel drive assembly on here. I cut it off and welded it closed. Typically you'll just have a steel pan on there, so this is going to be a little different. On the steel pans you'll have just standard bolts all the way around. This one has studs with 14 mil nuts poking through the block that are tightened on the top side, and you've got 14 mils that run along the pan rails, and then you've just got 10 mils on the nose and the tail of the pan. So let's go ahead and get all those zipped off of there. Yeah, okay. Alright, now that we've got all the bolts off the perimeter of the oil pan, including the studs on the side, like I said, most of you are going to have a standard RB25 pan. It's going to be 10mm bolts all the way around from the top. Not a big deal. Or the bottom, I mean. This one does have studs coming from this side and this side. Just around where the CV shaft comes out on this side and where the diff would be on a typical one. So now we're just going to grab our handy dead blow. Give it a whack right here. If you got the steel pan, you might have to get you one of these. Get you a nice wedge of some sort. Get up underneath the lip and just give it a tap until you get underneath there. Give it a little pry. Move over to the other side. Maybe one more dip back here and it should be good. Might get caught up on the pickup too, but other than that, it should just come right off. Most of your steel pans don't have this much of a baffle. The reason I use this pan was for the fact that it's winged, so it holds more oil. It is front sump, so it gives me the ability to be in front of the cross member, and then it has all these extra baffles to keep the oil from rushing to the back. Because we did have a steel pan to start with, and every time you do a launch, oil would just go to the back of the pan and you'd see the oil pressure just dip right off. So, alright, now that we've got the oil pan off and we haven't seen these shavings, which is always a good day, we are going to take off our oil pickup and our baffle system. Or technically these are a windage tray, they're not the baffle. The baffle is in the oil pan. Your pickup will look different on different blocks. There's actually stamping for the other oil pans. They'll usually have longer tubes. But this one is right here and it's just two 12mm bolts, and then our windage tray is 10 mils. We'll get that zipped off there and then we will get on to the oil pump. Alright, now that we got our windage trays off and our pickup tube, we're going to go ahead and take our timing pulley off. It'll be a little stiff, but just screwdriver up underneath it. Kind of bump it a few times to get it out far enough. You can just kind of tap it with the hammer. If you need to, you can use a puller up just like we did the crank pulley. Comes right off. And then you got a washer back here. You don't want to lose this. You can put it in the same spot. There's a keyway on it, so line the keyway up with the washer. Spin it off. There's that one. Alright, now we just gotta take all our bolts out, and they're just 10 mils along the perimeter of the oil pump. And just zip them off with an impact. Alright, now that the bolts are loose, same concept as pretty much everything else we've taken off. Grab something to get up underneath the edge of it. Find a good spot. Usually right here. There's a little flat you can sneak into. Do a little tap on one side. Same thing on the other side. Right at the pan rail is a good spot. Once it comes forward, it should just come right off. There are some dowels, I believe, up here in this thing. A little bit. A little wiggle. Stock paper gasket's really fighting. So, now we're to the point where we can talk about the crank collar and why you need to replace it. So if you look, if you're able to see it. See it? Mm-hmm. Alright. Oh, it's leaking oil all over the place. If you look right here, this is the flat where it drives on the crank. If you see that there's a discolored spot where you can see where the crank was beating on that ring inside the oil pump, and that is what causes the oil pump to shatter and explode. Just because of the slack in there, and if you look on the crank, it doesn't go the full length. We can get Bob to come up here. It's not the same distance as this, so this is about half the depth of what that is. So we're literally only driving on that last little bit. So with an extended crank collar, they cut all this off and they press a new collar on here. That way you get that nice thicker drive, that way you can have a solid drive. Or nowadays they do like a II Z adapter where they put on a II Z oil pump drive and then use II Z modified oil pump gears. But otherwise, we don't have to worry about that on this one because this one is going full dry sump. So we won't even be putting those gears back in the housing. Alright, now we gotta do our rear main. Typically, what I would recommend is before you even put this thing on the stand, I would take this off, because doing this with the stand on is kind of a pain in the butt. You can do it. You gotta squeeze down here, and there's not enough room to get your hand in here, as you can see. So what I typically do when you take the clutch off, go ahead and zip these 10 mil bolts out. You can just leave the rear main sit on there, but take these 10 mil bolts out, and you'll thank yourself later when it comes to here to pry it out. So I'll go ahead and do that with a wrench, but you'll see how much of a pain in the butt it is. Alright, now that we've wrestled with those bolts for way longer than it should took, definitely recommend taking those bolts out. You don't have to try to get the rear main seal off until now, but if you take those bolts out, it makes your life a lot easier. Handy dandy pry tool that we've been using, right along the top there. Just give it a few taps. Give it a little pry. Slowly go around it. A little pry, it should come right out. Boom. It's out of there. And now we will set up and get ready to pull the rods, pistons, and crank. Alright, now that we've got the rear main off, we're going to go ahead and take our pistons out. I went ahead and marked them on the end of the rod caps, 1 through 6. Just mark them however you want, just make sure they're marked. Grab you a 14mm socket, ratchet, break them loose. If you're not going to reuse them, you could just use the impact on them. Take them out. Take your nuts off. I leave one attached, screwed up just a little bit. And take the back end of a hammer, hit the stud, it'll fall away from the rod. Undo your nut. Put your hand down here just in case. It might fall out, it might not. Lay your cap off to the side so you know the orientation of it, so you can slap it back on the piston. Push down. If you can't quite get your hand on it all the way, take your hammer. Just give it a little push. Pull it out the bottom, try not to scrape the rods against the cylinder walls. Ooh, full of oil. Just give it a little quick examination, make sure there's nothing seriously wrong with it. We'll do a full once over before we reassemble. We'll do a cleaning and check over video. Just go ahead and put your nuts back on there. Make sure the cap's orientated correctly. Just set it off to the side. Do the next 5. Alright, now that we got our rod bolts out, we're going to go ahead and take our girdle off. Same thing with the head, start in the center, work our way out, quarter turn at a time until they're all loose, and then you can just run them out. And it is 17 mil, by the way. You should get one engraved on the turbo.
Good.
I got you. Okay, we're not redoing this.
I'm trying to pick the camera. Yeah, something. I'll walk across the top. There you go. Sure, I guess. Here we go. Anyways. Cut.
Now that the bolts are out, you can try to give it a yank. Sometimes it'll come out, but usually a little bit of prying action right there on the pan rail should come right out. Be super careful with it. Don't want to drop it because it will bend. Alright, same thing with the crank. Just put a little pull, should come right out. Now the crank I don't recommend leaving lay because they are heavy, and if you leave them lay, a lot of times they will warp because they're not supported all the way across. So usually what I do is I stand it up if it's going to be long-term storage, zip tie it to a post on like your workbench or something, wrap it in a plastic bag first, and then zip tie it to the side of the bench if it's going to be sitting. If it's just going to be for a short term, laying down for like a half hour, it's not going to hurt it, but over a long period of time it can cause it to warp the crank. Now that we got that out, the only thing we got left to do is take out the oil squirters, and the block will be stripped. And they should just be, I think that's a 12mm 12-point socket. Alright, so the crank's out. Now all we got left to do is pull out our oil squirters. It is a 10mm 12-point socket. Just get a nice long extension, get down in there. Make sure you're nice and square on them. And then you just break them loose. Now that the oil squirters are out, the bottom end is disassembled other than these studs on the front for our timing tensioner. You can leave those in or take them out depending on what your machine shop wants, if they want them in or out. Other than that, we are done. We will do all the spec checking in a different video where we show you how to clean and prep the block for either reassembly or sending off to the machine shop for final machine work. But other than that, we are done. So we will see you next time, and if you could share and subscribe, that'd be great. Put your right there.
Yes, it is recording.